The scream that tore through the desert night was enough to wake the dead, but the woman sleeping beneath the wagon didn't make a sound. Austin Lancaster had been riding for 3 days straight, pushing his horse harder than he should have, trying to outrun memories that clung to him like desert dust. When he heard that scream pierce the darkness somewhere near the canyon rim, every instinct told him to keep riding. Nothing good happened to men who went looking for trouble in the Utah Territory at midnight. But his conscience, that stubborn thing his mother had beaten into him with Bible verses and stern looks, wouldn't let him pass by. He guided his mare toward the sound, hand resting on the pistol at his hip, eyes scanning the moonlit landscape. The settlement of Tropic lay another day's ride south, and out here in this desolate stretch between the Paunsaugunt Plateau and the canyon country, a person could disappear without a trace. The year was 1883, and the West was still wild enough that screams in the night meant someone was dying or about to be. What he found wasn't what he expected. A wagon sat tilted at an odd angle, one wheel clearly broken, abandoned by whoever had been traveling this rough excuse for a road. 3 men on horseback circled it like vultures, their laughter carrying on the wind. Austin could smell the whiskey from 50 yards away. As he drew closer, he could make out their words. "Come on out, sweetheart. We know you're in there somewhere. Maybe she's hiding in the wagon bed." "I'll check. Probably ran off into the desert. We should split up, find her." Austin cleared his throat loud enough to carry. "Evening, gentlemen." 3 heads whipped toward him, hands dropping to their guns. In the moonlight, he could see they were younger than their voices suggested, probably ranch hands out for a night of trouble. The kind of men who felt brave in numbers and stupid with drink. "This ain't your concern, stranger," the tallest one said. His voice wavered slightly, caught between aggression and uncertainty. "That's true enough," Austin agreed, keeping his tone conversational. "But I'm making it my concern. Whatever you boys are looking for, I suggest you look elsewhere." "There's 3 of us and 1 of you," another one said, but he didn't sound convinced. Austin let his coat fall back, revealing not just 1 pistol but 2, worn low and easy on his hips. He didn't say anything. Sometimes silence spoke louder than threats. The 3 men exchanged glances. The whiskey made them bold, but not stupid enough to ignore a man who carried himself like he knew how to use those guns. After a long moment, the tall one spat in the dirt and yanked his horse's reins. "She ain't worth the trouble anyway," he muttered, and they rode off into the darkness, their laughter fading into the wind. Austin waited until he couldn't hear their hoofbeats any more before dismounting. He approached the wagon carefully, aware that whoever was hiding might not know he'd sent the men away, might be scared enough to shoot first and ask questions later. "They're gone," he called out. "I'm not going to hurt you." Silence. The wind whispered through the scrub brush. His horse nickered softly. He walked around the wagon, checking the broken wheel, noting the supplies scattered in the dirt. Someone had left in a hurry or been robbed or both. That's when he saw her, curled up tight beneath the wagon bed itself, so still he almost missed her in the shadows. She was sleeping. Austin crouched down, genuinely puzzled. The woman was wrapped in a dark shawl, her face turned away from him, breathing slow and steady. How anyone could sleep through what had just happened was beyond his understanding, but there she was, dead to the world. He reached out to shake her shoulder gently, then thought better of it. Touching a sleeping woman uninvited was a good way to get slapped or worse. Instead, he knocked on the wagon bed above her head. "Madam, those men are gone. You can come out now." Nothing. She didn't even stir. He tried again, louder. "Madam, hello," still nothing. Austin sat back on his heels, considering. She wasn't dead. He could see her breathing. but she was sleeping so deeply that for a moment he wondered if she was ill or if those men had drugged her somehow, though that didn't make sense. If they'd gotten close enough to drug her, they wouldn't have been circling the wagon looking for her. He made a decision that probably wasn't wise but felt necessary. He crawled closer and touched her shoulder, shaking it firmly. "Madam, you need to wake up." She jerked awake with a gasp, scrambling backward and cracking her head on the wagon bed with a sound that made him wince. Her hand fumbled for something in the folds of her dress, and a knife appeared, gleaming in the moonlight. "Stay back," she said, her voice rough with sleep and fear. Austin immediately raised his hands, backing up to give her space. "Easy now. I'm not here to hurt you. There were 3 men circling your wagon. I sent them away." She stared at him, eyes wide in a pale face. Even in the dim light, he could see she was young, probably close to his own 27 years. Dark hair had escaped from its pins and hung in tangles around her shoulders. There was dirt on her cheek and a fierce determination in her eyes that made him think she'd know how to use that knife if she had to. "What men?" she asked. 3 ranch hands, drunk and looking for trouble. "They heard you scream." She blinked, lowering the knife slightly. "I didn't scream." "Well, someone did. That's what brought me here, and them too." She crawled out from under the wagon slowly, keeping the knife between them, and looked around. In the moonlight, her face was all angles and shadows. "The coyotes," she said finally. "Sometimes they sound almost human." "I've gotten used to it." She swayed slightly as she stood, and Austin resisted the urge to reach out and steady her. She wouldn't welcome it, and besides, she still had that knife. "You've been sleeping under a wagon while coyotes scream overhead?" he asked. "I've been sleeping anywhere I can," she said, and there was something in her voice, a weariness that went bone deep, that told him she'd been traveling alone for longer than was safe. "My wheel broke 2 days ago. I've been walking, but I couldn't make it to Tropic before dark, so I came back here. My supplies are here, what's left of them." 2 days? You've been out here for 2 days alone. "I'm a widow," she said, as if that explained everything. "Teresa Evans. My husband died 6 months ago. I was traveling to meet his brother in Panguitch, but I don't have money to fix the wheel, and I can't carry everything by myself." The way she said it, flat and matter-of-fact, told him she'd been carrying too much for too long, in more ways than one. "Austin Lancaster," he said, lowering his hand slowly, "and I can fix your wheel." She looked at him with suspicion. "Why would you do that?" "Because it needs fixing, and I know how, and leaving you out here alone isn't something I could live with." He paused. "When did you last eat?" Teresa hesitated, and he had his answer. "I've got supplies," he said. "Why don't you put that knife away and let me make us some coffee? Then we can talk about your wheel." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her weighing options, calculating risks. A lone woman in the desert couldn't afford to trust easily, but she also couldn't afford to refuse help. Finally, she nodded and slipped the knife back into her dress. "I don't have money to pay you," she said. "Didn't ask for any." He built a small fire using the wagon as a windbreak, more for light and comfort than warmth, though the desert night was cooler than the brutal day. Teresa sat on the other side of the flames, watching him with those wary eyes as he set up his battered coffee pot and pulled out strips of dried beef and hard biscuits. It wasn't much, but it was food. "How did your husband die?" Austin asked, then immediately regretted it when he saw her face close off. "Sorry, that's not my business." "Fever," she said after a moment. "It went through our town in Kansas, took him and 20 others." She accepted the coffee he handed her, wrapping her hands around the tin cup. "We'd only been married 8 months. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry." She took a sip of the coffee, and some of the tension left her shoulders. "But sorry doesn't pay debts or fix wagons or put food on the table. His brother wrote and said I could come stay with his family in Panguitch. Said Thomas would have wanted him to look after me. So I sold what little we had and bought this wagon and supplies and started west. Long journey for a woman alone, her eyes flashed. I'm not helpless. Never said you were. Just said it was long. He bit into a piece of dried beef, chewing slowly. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? 24. And you? 27. Been ranching and cowboying since I was 14, though recently I've been doing more drifting than working. Why's that? Austin stared into the fire. Sometimes a place stops feeling like home. Thought I'd see what else was out there. They sat in silence for a while, and Austin found himself studying her when she wasn't looking. Even exhausted and travel-worn, there was something striking about Teresa Evans. She had the kind of face that probably smiled easy in better times, though right now it was set in hard lines of determination and fatigue. She ate the food he'd given her with careful, measured bites, like someone who'd learned to make meals last. Your wheel's going to need a new spoke, he said eventually. Maybe two. I've got tools and some wood I can work with, but it'll take most of tomorrow to fix it proper. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering. He refilled her coffee. And I'll ride with you to Panguitch after that. Make sure you get there safe. Why? The word came out sharp, almost accusatory. Why would you do all that for a stranger? Austin considered the question seriously. My mother used to say that kindness isn't kindness if you only give it when it's convenient. And I guess I don't like the idea of you out here alone. If something happened to you and I'd just ridden away, I'd never forgive myself. Teresa looked at him across the fire, and something in her expression softened slightly. You're either a very good man or a very good liar. Maybe I'm both, he said with a small smile. But tonight, I'm the man who's going to fix your wheel and make sure you get where you're going safely. What you think of me beyond that is your business. She studied him for another long moment, then nodded. All right, thank you. You're welcome. Now you should get some real sleep. Not under the wagon. You can sleep in the wagon bed and I'll keep watch out here. Those men might come back. They won't. But if they do, I'll handle it. Teresa looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She climbed into the wagon bed, and within minutes he could hear her breathing even out. Austin sat by the dying fire, his rifle across his knees, and watched the stars wheel overhead. He thought about fate and chance, about how a coyote's scream had led him here, to this broken wagon and this stubborn widow who probably had no idea how brave she was. When dawn broke pink and gold across the desert, Austin was already examining the wheel. It was worse than he'd thought. 3 spokes were cracked and the rim was warped. He had the tools and the knowledge to fix it, but it was going to be a full day's work, maybe more. Teresa emerged from the wagon looking marginally better than she had the night before. She'd pinned her dark hair up and washed her face with water from her canteen. In the morning light, he could see that her dress had been mended multiple times, carefully stitched with pride if not prosperity. How bad is it? She asked, coming to stand beside him. Bad enough that you're lucky you didn't lose the whole wheel and flip the wagon, but I can fix it. I should help. You can hand me tools when I need them, but mostly you should rest. When's the last time you had a full night's sleep? She opened her mouth as if to protest, then closed it again. I don't remember, she admitted quietly. Then rest. I've got this. He worked through the morning, stripping the broken spokes and shaping new ones from the wood he carried. It was precise work, requiring patience and skill. Teresa sat in the shade of the wagon, watching him work with an intensity that made him self-conscious at first. But as the hours passed, he found himself explaining what he was doing, and she asked intelligent questions that showed she was actually interested. My father was a carpenter, she said at one point, before he died. I used to watch him work like this, shaping wood, fitting pieces together. He said every piece of wood has a purpose, you just have to find it. Smart man. He was. A shadow crossed her face. He died when I was 16. My mother went 2 years later. Thomas was a neighbor who'd always been kind to me. We married when I was 23 last year. I thought finally, here's someone who'll stay, but fever doesn't care about plans. Austin drove a spoke into place with careful taps of his hammer. I lost my father to a range war when I was 12. Mother raised me and my 2 sisters alone. She was harder than saddle leather and twice as tough, taught us that self-pity was a luxury we couldn't afford. Is she still alive? No, died 3 years back. My sisters married and moved east. I stayed on the ranch for a while, but without her there, it felt empty. So I sold it and started drifting. Do you miss it? Having a home, the question hung in the air between them. Austin paused in his work, considering. Yeah, he said finally. But I don't know if I miss what it was or what I wished it could be. By midday, the heat was brutal. They retreated to the shade, sharing more of his supplies. Teresa had a little cornmeal left, and she insisted on making Johnny cakes over the fire, her hands moving with practiced efficiency despite the primitive conditions. You're good at that, he observed. I've had practice. Thomas and I didn't have much. I learned to make meals from whatever we had. She flipped the cakes with her fingers, quick enough not to burn. What about you? Can you cook? Well enough not to starve, but nothing fancy. She smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her, and it transformed her face completely. For a moment he could see past the grief and exhaustion to the woman she must have been before loss had marked her. What? She asked, catching him staring. Nothing, just you should smile more. The smile faded slightly. Haven't had much reason to lately. Fair enough. They ate the Johnny cakes with a little precious honey Teresa had saved, and Austin thought it was one of the better meals he'd had in weeks, though he knew that had less to do with the food and more to do with the company. As the afternoon wore on and he continued working on the wheel, they talked more. She told him about Kansas, about the little town where she'd lived, about Thomas and his quiet kindness. He told her about his years working ranches across Colorado and Utah, about the time he'd helped drive cattle to Nevada and nearly got trampled in a stampede. You've lived quite a life, she said, still living it. Not done yet. No, she agreed. I suppose none of us are done until we're done. By evening, the wheel was fixed. Austin tested it carefully, rolling the wagon back and forth, checking the spokes and the rim. It would hold at least until Panguitch. He'd stake his reputation on it. Teresa stood beside him, looking at the repaired wheel with something like wonder. I can't believe you did all that in one day. Like I said, I know my way around wood and wagons. He wiped his hands on his pants. We can head out first light tomorrow. It's about 3 days to Panguitch if we don't push too hard. She turned to look at him, and in the fading light her eyes were serious. Why are you doing this? Really? And don't tell me it's just because you're kind. Nobody's this kind without reason. Austin met her gaze steadily. Maybe I'm doing it because 6 months ago you lost everything. And maybe I'm doing it because I know what it's like to feel alone in a place too big and empty to hold your grief. Or maybe I'm doing it because when I saw you sleeping under that wagon, looking so small and so stubborn at the same time, I thought, here's someone who deserves better than what she's gotten. And if I can help give you better, even just a safe journey to your brother-in-law's place, then maybe that's reason enough. Teresa's eyes glistened, but she blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall. You're a strange man, Austin Lancaster. I've been called worse. She laughed then, a surprised sound that seemed to catch her off guard. I believe that. That night, they made a proper camp. Austin shot a rabbit, and Teresa roasted it with wild onions she'd gathered, making a stew that filled the evening with savory smells. They ate slowly, talking about small things, comfortable things. He learned that she loved reading but had to sell most of her books. She learned that he played harmonica, though not well. As the stars emerged, brilliant in the clear desert sky, Teresa said quietly, "I was scared, you know. When you woke me, I thought you were one of them. I figured. But I'm glad you weren't, glad you're here." She paused. "I've been alone so long. Even before Thomas died, I felt alone. He was kind, but he didn't see me. Not really. He saw a wife, someone to cook and clean and keep house. But not me." Austin poked at the fire with a stick. "That's lonely, being with someone who doesn't see you." "Yes," she looked at him. "You see me, though, I can tell. You look at me like I'm a person, not just a woman you need to protect or rescue, like I'm real. You are real. One of the realest people I've met." Something shifted between them then, subtle but unmistakable, an awareness, a recognition. Teresa felt it and looked away, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "It's too soon," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Too soon for what?" "To feel anything. Thomas has only been gone 6 months." Austin didn't pretend not to understand. "I'm not asking you to feel anything. I'm just going to get you to Panguitch safely, that's all." But they both knew it wasn't that simple anymore. They set out at dawn, the wagon rolling smoothly on its repaired wheel. Austin rode alongside, sometimes ranging ahead to scout the road, sometimes falling back to check their trail. The country was beautiful in a harsh way, red rock and sage under an endless sky. The heat during the day was punishing, but they made steady progress. Teresa proved to be capable with the wagon team, handling the 2 horses with confidence. When he commented on it, she said, "Thomas taught me. Said a woman needed to know how to handle horses if she was going to survive out here." He was right about that at least. On the second day, they reached a small creek and stopped to water the horses and refill their canteens. Austin caught fish for their dinner, and they ate beside the running water, enjoying the relative coolness. "Tell me about the ranch you sold," Teresa said. "What was it like?" Austin leaned back on his elbows, staring up at the sky. "It was in Colorado, in a valley with a creek running through it. The house wasn't much, just a cabin really, but my mother made it home. We had cattle and horses, and in the summer the wildflowers would bloom so thick you could hardly see the grass. It sounds beautiful." It was. "But after she died, I'd sit on the porch and just feel empty. My sisters wanted me to keep it, said I was foolish to sell. But I couldn't stay there alone, surrounded by ghosts. I understand that. That's why I left Kansas. Everything there reminded me of what I'd lost." He looked at her. "Do you think we ever stop running from ghosts? I don't know. Maybe when we find something worth standing still for." The third day dawned cloudy, a rarity in the desert. The clouds brought no rain, but they blocked the sun's worst heat, making the traveling easier. They talked more that day, ranging from serious to silly. He made her laugh with a story about a horse that had bucked him into a water trough. She told him about the time she'd accidentally dyed all her undergarments pink trying to make rose water. "I had to wear pink drawers for months," she said, laughing at the memory. "I was mortified. Did anyone know?" Thomas knew. He thought it was funny, said I was the prettiest thing in pink. The mention of her husband created a small silence, but it wasn't as heavy as before. Teresa could speak of him now without that look of devastation crossing her face. As they crested a rise, Panguitch came into view in the distance, a small settlement against the red landscape. Teresa pulled the wagon to a stop, staring at it. "There it is," she said softly. "There it is," Austin agreed, but neither of them moved. They sat there on the rise, the wind whisking around them, the town waiting below. "What will you do?" Teresa asked finally. After you deliver me. Keep drifting, I suppose. Maybe find work on a ranch. Maybe just keep moving. That sounds lonely. It is what it is. She turned to look at him, and he was struck again by the strength in her face, the resilience. This woman who'd lost so much and kept going. Come with me, she said suddenly. Austin blinked. What? Come with me. Meet Thomas's brother. Stay a few days. You've come all this way. You should at least rest before you move on. Teresa, I don't think that's wise. Why not? Because I'm starting to care about you more than I should, he thought. Because every day on this journey has made it harder to imagine riding away. Because when you laugh, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Because I'm a stranger, he said instead. Your brother-in-law doesn't know me. And people talk. Let them talk. You saved me. You fixed my wagon. You got me here safely. The least I can do is offer you a meal and a bed that isn't the hard ground. He wanted to refuse. The smart thing would be to see her safely to her brother-in-law's door and then ride away before his feelings got any deeper. But when he looked at her face, saw the hope there, he couldn't bring himself to say no. All right, he agreed. A few days. Her smile was reward enough for his weakness. They reached Panguitch as the sun was setting. It was a small town, Mormon settled, neat and orderly with its wide streets and irrigation ditches. Teresa directed him to a house on the edge of town, a modest but well-kept place with a barn and a garden. Before they could even dismount, the door flew open and a man emerged, followed by a woman and 3 children. Teresa, the man called. Teresa Evans. Robert, she called back, and there was relief in her voice. Robert Evans looked to be in his mid-30s, solid and bearded with kind eyes. His wife Sarah was younger, perhaps 30, with the weathered look of a woman used to hard work. The children ranged from about 10 down to 5, all staring at the newcomers with unabashed curiosity. We'd almost given up on you, Robert said, coming to help Teresa down from the wagon. Your letter said you'd be here weeks ago. We thought something must have happened. Something did. My wagon broke down, but Austin helped me, she gestured to him. Austin Lancaster, this is my brother-in-law Robert Evans and his family. Austin dismounted and shook Robert's offered hand, aware of the man's measuring gaze. Robert was taking in everything, Austin's guns, his worn but quality tack, the way Teresa looked at him. Pleased to meet you, Robert said carefully. Looks like we owe you thanks for helping Teresa. No thanks needed, just did what was right. Sarah stepped forward, her smile warm. Well, you must both be exhausted. Come inside. We'll get you fed and settled. The Evans home was crowded but comfortable. Over a dinner of venison stew and fresh bread, Austin learned that Robert was a carpenter like his brother had been, and Sarah took in sewing to help make ends meet. The children, 2 girls and a boy, were named Mary, Elizabeth, and Joseph. They were well-behaved but curious, especially about Austin. Are you a real cowboy? Joseph asked, eyes wide. I've worked cattle, if that's what you mean. You shoot outlaws, Joseph, Sarah said warningly, but Austin smiled. No outlaws, mostly just ornery cows. After dinner, while Sarah and Teresa cleaned up and got the children ready for bed, Robert invited Austin out to the barn to help settle the horses. So, Robert said once they were alone, what's really going on between you and my sister-in-law? Austin had expected this. Nothing improper, if that's what you're asking. I found her wagon broken down, fixed it, and rode with her to make sure she got here safely. That's a lot of effort for a stranger. She needed help. Robert studied him in the dim lantern light. Thomas was my younger brother. He was a good man, but between us, he wasn't the warmest person. Teresa deserved better than what she got with him, and she's been through hell these past months. I know. So if you're playing with her, if you're going to hurt her, you can move on right now. Austin met his gaze steadily. I'm not playing with anyone, but I'm also not making promises I can't keep. I'm a drifter, Robert. I don't have a home or a job or anything to offer a woman. She deserves better than that, too. What does she want? I don't know. We haven't talked about it. Robert nodded slowly. Fair enough. But I'll tell you this. I've known Teresa since she married my brother. I've never seen her look at anyone the way she looks at you. So maybe you should talk about it. That night, Austin slept in the barn loft, comfortable in the hay with the horses moving below. But sleep was a long time coming. He kept thinking about Teresa, about the journey they'd shared, about the way she laughed and the strength in her eyes. He thought about Robert's words. He thought about the fact that he didn't want to drift anymore. The next morning, Sarah put Austin to work immediately. There was always work to be done, and Sarah believed idle hands were the devil's workshop. He helped Robert with carpentry jobs around town, and in the evenings, he found himself at the Evans table, part of the family rhythm. Teresa was settling in too, helping Sarah with the endless tasks of running a household and caring for children. But Austin caught her watching him sometimes, and there was something in her expression that made his heart beat faster. On the third day, he found her alone in the garden picking beans. Mind if I help? He asked. Not at all. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the sun warm on their backs, the smell of growing things all around them. It's nice here, Teresa said eventually. Robert and Sarah have been so kind. The children are sweet. But she smiled slightly. How did you know there was a but? I'm learning to read you. She set down her basket and turned to face him. But it's not my home. I'm grateful, so grateful, but I'm also 24 years old and living on charity. Sarah doesn't mean to, but she treats me like another child sometimes. And I want something of my own. Does that make me ungrateful? No, it makes you human. What about you? Are you leaving soon? This was the moment. He could say yes, could thank them all for their hospitality and ride out tomorrow, could go back to drifting, carrying nothing but his saddle and his solitude, but he didn't want to. Teresa, he said carefully, what are we doing? What do you mean? I mean this. Us. Every day I stay, it gets harder to think about leaving. And I see you watching me, and I think maybe you feel it too. But you're a widow. It's only been 6 months, and I'm a nobody with nothing to offer. So what are we doing? She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers twisting together. I feel like I've been asleep for years, she said finally. Ever since my parents died, I went through the motions. I married Thomas because it was practical, because I needed security. I was his wife, but I wasn't alive. And then he died, and I thought, well, that's it. That's all I get. She looked up at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. But then you woke me up. Literally under that wagon, but also just by seeing me, by talking to me like I matter, by making me laugh. And I know it's too soon. I know people will think I'm terrible for feeling anything for another man when my husband's barely cold in his grave. But Austin, I can't help it. You make me feel alive. His heart was pounding so hard he thought she must be able to hear it. Teresa, I don't have anything. No home, no steady work, nothing. I don't care about that. You should care. A woman needs security. A woman needs to feel alive, she countered. She needs someone who sees her and values her and makes her believe that maybe there's more to life than just surviving. Austin reached out and took her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm, the strength in her fingers. I'm falling in love with you, he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I've been falling since I saw you under that wagon, looking so fierce and so vulnerable at the same time. And it scares me because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the man you deserve. Then we'll figure it out together, she said, and she was crying now, but smiling too. Because I'm falling in love with you too, and I don't want to fight it anymore. He kissed her then, right there in the garden with the bean plants as witnesses. It was gentle at first, tentative, but then she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with a passion that took his breath away. She tasted like sunshine and hope, like everything good he'd thought he'd lost. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Teresa laughed shakily. "What now?" "Now," Austin said, "I talked to Robert. I ask his permission to court you properly, the way you should have been courted all along. And I find work, real work, so I can prove I'm not just a drifter who's going to disappear. And we take this slow as we need to, until you're ready." "I'm ready now," she said. "No, people are already going to talk. We do this right, so no one can say I took advantage. So you can hold your head high." She touched his face, her fingers gentle on his rough cheek. "When did I get so lucky? I think I'm the lucky one." That evening, after dinner, Austin asked Robert if he could speak with him privately. They walked out to the barn together, and Austin felt like he was 16 again, nervous and uncertain. "I want to court Teresa," he said without preamble, "properly, with your blessing since you're her family now." Robert leaned against a stall door, studying him. "That was quick." "I know how it looks, but I mean it. I'm in love with her, Robert. And I know I don't have much to offer right now, but I'm a hard worker. I can find steady employment. I can build a life for her." "What does Teresa want?" "She says she wants this, wants me." Robert was quiet for a long moment. "My brother married her because she needed a husband and he needed a wife. It was practical and it was lonely for both of them. I don't want that for her again. Neither do I. But she's vulnerable right now, grieving. She might think she knows what she wants, but 6 months ago she lost everything. I know that. That's why I want to do this right, court her properly, give her time to be sure." Robert sighed. "You're a good man, Austin Lancaster, better than most. If Teresa wants this, I won't stand in your way, but I'll be watching. And if you hurt her, I'll make you regret it. Fair enough. And you need to find work. I can't support you both, much as I might want to. I'll find something. There must be ranches around here that need hands." Robert nodded slowly. "Actually, there might be something. Old widow named Margaret Ellis has a small ranch about 5 miles out. Her husband died last year, and she's been struggling to keep it running with just her son. She was saying just last week she needs help. Can't pay much, but there's a cabin on the property you could stay in." "That sounds perfect. I'll introduce you tomorrow." True to his word, Robert took Austin out to the Ellis ranch the next day. Margaret Ellis was a tough woman in her 50s, with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. Her son Nathaniel was 21, eager but inexperienced. The ranch was small, just a couple hundred head of cattle and some horses, but it was clear it had been well run before Mr. Ellis's death. "You know cattle?" Margaret asked Austin, looking him up and down. "Yes, madam. Worked ranches since I was 14. Can you break horses?" "I can." "What about branding, castrating, all the dirty work, all of it?" She studied him for another moment, then nodded. "The pay is $30 a month plus room and board. The cabin needs work, but it's livable. You pull your weight, we'll get along fine. You slack off, you can move along. Deal, deal." They shook on it, and just like that, Austin had a job and a home. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He moved into the cabin that afternoon. It was small, just one room with a fireplace, but it had a solid roof and a good door. Margaret had been right that it needed work. The chinking between the logs needed replacing, and the floor was rough, but he'd lived in worse. That evening, he rode back to Panguitch and found Teresa in the Evans kitchen, helping Sarah prepare dinner. "Can you take a walk with me?" he asked. They strolled through the town as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. He told her about the job, about the cabin, about his plans. "So you're staying," she said, and her smile was radiant. "I'm staying. And I'm going to court you if you'll have me. We'll do this proper, dinners with your family. walks through town where everyone can see we're behaving respectfully. Church on Sundays. Church, she teased. I didn't take you for a religious man. I'm not particularly, but you are, and I respect that. And besides, if we're going to do this right, that means showing this town that I'm a respectable man with honest intentions. She took his hand as they walked. How long do you think we should court? I don't know. How long does it take to convince a town that a widow deserves happiness, with gossips like Mrs. Henderson? Probably forever. Then we'll take as long as we need. I'm not going anywhere. But it didn't take forever. It took 6 months, which in Teresa's mind was exactly right. 6 months to balance the 6 months of mourning. 6 months for the town to see that Austin Lancaster was indeed a good man. 6 months of dinners and walks and church services and slow, sweet courtship. Austin proved himself at the Ellis Ranch, working harder than anyone expected. He fixed the cabin until it was tight and warm. He repaired fences and broke horses and helped Nathaniel learn the skills his father hadn't lived long enough to teach him. Margaret Ellis, never one to give praise easily, told anyone who would listen that Austin was the best thing that had happened to her ranch in years. In town, people watched as Austin courted Teresa with old-fashioned propriety. He brought her flowers from the meadows. He sat in the Evans parlor and made conversation with Robert and Sarah while the children played around them. He escorted her to church every Sunday, standing beside her while she sang hymns in a voice that was surprisingly lovely. Slowly, grudgingly, even the biggest gossips had to admit that whatever was happening between the widow and the cowboy was decent and proper, and actually quite sweet. Teresa bloomed like a desert flower after rain. The exhaustion and grief that had marked her face when Austin first met her faded, replaced by joy. She laughed often, smiled constantly. She helped Sarah with the children and the house, but she also started doing sewing work of her own, saving money for her future. What are you saving for? Sarah asked her one evening. A hope chest, Teresa said, for when I marry again. Sarah smiled. Austin's a good man. He's the best man. He sees me, Sarah, really sees me. You know how rare that is. On a warm spring evening, 6 months after they'd begun courting, Austin asked Robert if he could speak to Teresa alone, properly supervised, of course. Robert agreed, and he and Sarah sat on the porch while Austin and Teresa walked in the garden. I have something to ask you, Austin said, and his voice was nervous in a way Teresa had never heard before. Yes. Her heart was pounding. He took her hands in his. Teresa Evans, I love you more than I thought possible to love anyone. These past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. You make me want to be better, do better, build something lasting. I know I don't have much. I'm just a cowboy working a small ranch. But I have a cabin that I've made into a home, and I have a steady job, and I have a heart that's completely and utterly yours. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Yes, she said, not even having to think about it. Yes, yes, yes. He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple silver band with a small turquoise stone. It's not much, he said apologetically. It's perfect, she breathed as he slipped it onto her finger. Everything about this is perfect. They kissed there in the garden, and from the porch, they heard Robert and Sarah applauding and the children cheering. They were married a month later in the small Mormon church in Panguitch. Teresa wore a dress that Sarah and the church women had made, pale blue with white lace. Austin wore his best clothes, his hair freshly cut, his face shaved smooth. Robert stood up with him and Sarah with Teresa. The church was full, the whole town coming out to see the widow and the cowboy wed. Even Mrs. Henderson, the biggest gossip in town, had to dab at her eyes with her handkerchief. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Austin kissed Teresa with such tenderness that several women sighed out loud. And when they walked back down the aisle together, hands clasped, faces glowing, everyone agreed it was one of the loveliest weddings Panguitch had ever seen. The reception was held at the church social hall, with food brought by what seemed like everyone in town. There was music and dancing, and Austin proved to be surprisingly good at the latter, swinging Teresa around the floor until she was breathless with laughter. As the sun set, they said their goodbyes and rode out to their cabin, to their home. Austin had spent the last week making it perfect. There were flowers on the table, fresh curtains on the windows, and a new quilt on the bed that Margaret Ellis had made as a wedding gift. "It's beautiful," Teresa said, looking around with tears in her eyes. "It's ours," Austin said, pulling her close. "All ours." That night, they came together as husband and wife, and it was everything Teresa had never had with Thomas. It was passion and tenderness, laughter and tears, two people truly seeing and knowing each other. Afterward, lying in Austin's arms, Teresa thought about how strange fate was, how a broken wagon and a coyote's scream had led her here, to this man, to this happiness. "What are you thinking?" Austin asked, stroking her hair. "That I'm the luckiest woman alive. I think that's my line." She propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd ridden past that night, if you'd ignored the scream all the time? And then I thank God I didn't. Me too." They settled into married life with the ease of people who were meant to be together. Teresa proved to be an excellent ranch wife, capable and hardworking. She kept the cabin spotless, cooked meals that made Austin groan with pleasure, and even helped with the ranch work when needed. She could rope calves and gentle horses, and Margaret Ellis said she had a natural way with animals. Austin worked hard, impressing Margaret so much that after a year, she offered him a partnership in the ranch. "Nathaniel's a good boy, but he doesn't have your head for cattle. I want you to have a stake in this place, make it worth your while to stay." Austin accepted gratefully, and suddenly, he and Teresa were more than just hired help. They were partners, building something real. 2 years after they married, Teresa told Austin she was expecting a baby. He was so overcome with joy that he picked her up and spun her around, only remembering to be careful when she laughingly reminded him of her condition. Their first child, a son they named Thomas after Teresa's first husband, was born on a snowy December night. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes, and from the moment Austin held him, he was completely in love. "He's perfect," Austin whispered, staring at the tiny face. "He is," Teresa agreed, exhausted but radiant. "Our perfect boy." 2 years later, they had a daughter they named Catherine, with Teresa's smile and Austin's stubborn chin. And then, 3 years after that, twin boys they named Robert and William, who kept them running from the moment they could crawl. The cabin was too small for their growing family, so Austin built an addition, and then another, until their home was a proper house with enough room for everyone. It sat on land that they eventually bought from Margaret when she decided to retire and move into town to live with Nathaniel and his new wife. The ranch prospered under Austin's management. He had a gift for breeding quality horses, and soon people were coming from all over Utah Territory to buy Austin Lancaster stock. Teresa managed the accounts, her head for numbers proving invaluable. Together, they built something neither had thought possible in those early days under a broken wagon. Robert and Sarah's children grew up alongside their cousins, and the two families remained close. Every Sunday, they gathered for dinner, the table overflowing with food and laughter and love. On quiet evenings, when the children were finally asleep and the ranch work was done, Austin and Teresa would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the red rock country. They'd talk about everything and nothing, comfortable in the way of couples who'd built a life together. "Do you ever miss drifting?" Teresa asked him once. "Never," he said without hesitation. "I was looking for something, I just didn't know what. Turns out it was you, it was this. Home. I'm glad you found me. Best thing I ever did was wake up that widow sleeping under a wagon. Best thing I ever did was trust the cowboy who woke me." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched the stars come out over their land, their home, their life. When Thomas was 18, he told his parents he wanted to be a rancher like his father. Catherine, at 16, announced she was going to be a teacher. The twins, still young at 13, hadn't decided yet, but they had time. Austin and Teresa, now in their 40s, watched their children grow with pride and amazement. Some nights, Austin would look at his life, his family, his home, and wonder how he'd gotten so lucky. "It wasn't luck," Teresa told him. "It was choice. You chose to help a stranger, I chose to trust you. We chose each other every day since. Then I'm glad we're both good at choosing." On their 20th wedding anniversary, Austin took Teresa back to the place where he'd found her, where the broken wagon had sat under the stars. The wagon was long gone, the road improved, but they could still remember exactly where it had been. "Sometimes I can't believe it's been 20 years, Teresa said. "Sometimes I can't believe it's only been 20 years. Feels like you've been mine forever. I have been. From the moment you woke me, I was yours." He kissed her, there under the same stars that had witnessed their beginning, and it was as sweet and right as their first kiss in the garden. They had more years together, good years filled with the kind of everyday love that people write songs about. They saw their children marry and have children of their own. They saw Panguitch grow and change, the Wild West settling into something gentler but no less beautiful. Margaret Ellis passed away peacefully at 82, leaving them a letter saying that hiring Austin had been the best decision she'd ever made, and that watching him and Teresa build their life had been one of her greatest joys. Robert and Sarah grew old alongside them, and the two families remained intertwined, their children and grandchildren carrying on the bond their parents had forged. When Austin was 55, he took a fall from a horse and broke his leg badly. Teresa nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she'd shown sleeping under that wagon all those years ago. When he was healed, though he walked with a slight limp, he said, "Guess I'm getting old." "We both are," Teresa said, "but we're doing it together. Wouldn't have it any other way." They handed more and more of the ranch work over to Thomas and his wife, and to their nephew Joseph, who'd come to work for them. They spent their days doing easier work, enjoying their grandchildren, sitting on the porch and reminiscing. "Do you ever regret it?" Austin asked Teresa one evening. "Marrying me instead of staying safe with Robert and Sarah?" "Never once," she said firmly. "You gave me a life, Austin, a real life, not just existence but joy and passion and purpose. You gave me children and a home and 25 years of love." "How could I ever regret that?" "Just checking," he said with a smile. "What about you? Ever regret stopping for that screaming coyote, best detour I ever took?" They had 32 years together before Austin passed away in his sleep at the age of 59, his hand held in Teresa's. It was peaceful, the doctor said. His heart simply stopped, but Teresa knew better. His heart didn't stop. It just moved into her keeping where it had always truly belonged. She mourned him deeply, this second husband who'd been everything her first had not, but she didn't break. Austin had taught her she was stronger than she knew. She lived another 15 years, watching her children and grandchildren grow, telling them stories about their grandfather, and the night he found her under a wagon. "He was the best man I ever knew," she'd tell them. "He saw me when I was invisible. He loved me when I thought I couldn't be loved. He gave me everything." When Teresa died at 71, surrounded by her children, her last words were, "Tell your father I'm coming home." They buried her next to Austin in the Panguitch Cemetery, under the red rock and the endless sky. On their shared headstone, their children had inscribed, Austin Lancaster, 1856-1915, Teresa Lancaster, 1859-1930. He woke her with an offer of forever. She gave him forever in return. The ranch continued through the generations, the Ellis Lancaster name becoming synonymous with quality and integrity throughout Utah. Thomas ran it after his father, and his son after him, each generation adding their own mark while honoring the foundation Austin and Teresa had built. The story of how they'd met became family legend, told and retold until everyone knew it by heart. How a cowboy heard a scream in the night and chose to investigate. How he found a widow sleeping under a wagon and decided to help. How that choice changed everything. In time, their love story became part of Panguitch's history too, the kind of romance that reminded people that sometimes the best things in life come from the unexpected. That sometimes a broken wagon and a kind stranger can lead to something extraordinary. That love, real love, is worth waiting for and fighting for and choosing every single day. And on quiet nights in that red rock country, when the wind whispered through the sage and the stars blazed overhead, old-timers would swear you could still feel it, the love between the widow and the cowboy, as enduring as the desert itself, as eternal as the sky. A reminder that some stories never really end. They just become part of the land, woven into the fabric of a place, inspiring new generations to believe in love that transforms, in kindness that saves, in the power of two people choosing each other against all odds. The cabin where they'd first lived together as husband and wife still stood on the ranch, carefully maintained by their descendants as a reminder of humble beginnings. Young couples getting married would visit it, touching the doorframe Austin had carved their initials into, hoping some of that legendary love would bless their own marriages. And sometimes, on anniversary nights, those same couples would drive out to the place where the old road used to run, where a wagon once sat broken under the stars, where a cowboy once found his forever. They'd stand there hand in hand, looking up at the same stars Austin and Teresa had looked at, and they'd remember that love isn't about perfection or timing or having everything figured out. Love is about showing up, about seeing someone who needs help and offering it, about trusting someone enough to let them in, about building something together, day by day, choice by choice, until you've created a life so full and rich and meaningful that it echoes through generations. That's what Austin and Teresa had done. From a chance meeting on a desperate night to a love that lasted decades and inspired countless others, they'd proven that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin in the most ordinary ways. With a broken wagon, with a kind stranger, with a simple offer of help that became an offer of forever. And in accepting that offer, in choosing love when she could have chosen safety, in trusting her heart when she could have listened to fear, Teresa had found not just a husband but a partner, not just a home but a life, not just survival but joy. Their story was proof that it's never too late for happiness, that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story, that sometimes the best chapter of your life begins when you're sleeping under a wagon in the middle of nowhere, and a cowboy wakes you up with hope in his eyes and forever in his heart.